The following is a conversation with Stephen Cicirelli, cybersecurity expert. We discuss quantum cryptography and what happens when our cryptographic algorithms are broken by quantum computers. We also go into examples of what kinds of hacker attacks we are all vulnerable to and what we can do to protect ourselves. If you like this podcast, please share, subscribe, like, comment, and if you really enjoy it, there is a Patreon link in the description. Welcome, Stephen. Thank you very much for coming to the interview. You're an expert on cybersecurity with a lot of years of experience and work in some very high secure facilities. So maybe let's start with the hot topic. What is the problem with the post-quantum security, post-quantum cryptography, how severe it is, and what is our current situation? How much time we have?
That's a good question. There's two different issues there. There's the quantum encryption, and then there's the process of implementing encryption that we have today versus the algorithms themselves. The algorithms we use for RSA are based on intrinsically difficult math problems, which means it's just hard to do. It takes a really long time to do it. Our computers run, billions of cycles per second, and it will take them hundreds of years to crack some of this, to come up with the keys. Quantum computing, however, uses superposition to be able to go through something like this particular problem easily. It doesn't say we have code for that yet. We have a couple proofs of concept that haven't been fully proven out, but in theory, you could crack that problem pretty much instantaneously using a quantum computer, rendering that capability for the public-private key encryption process to be broken easily, which means we need to come up with a different one. Some of the RSA encryption that we have now and the AES encryption could easily be broken through a quantum computer as well.
Why is that? Why is it easy mathematically?
Because it can do so many, instead of doing operations, it can use the superpositioning of the quantum bits, qubits, to come up with all the solutions at once.
Well, it sounds crazy for people who don't know quantum physics, right? How can it come up with all the solutions at once?
Yeah, because in quantum mechanics, things move as a probability curve. And this is becoming a problem in our CPUs, for example. The smaller they get, the thinner the wire, the more probable it is that the electron will exist off the wire. Now, 1 or 2 electrons here or there going into the insulation, not a big problem. You start having a lot of them do that, you stop computing.
Yeah.
So we're working on how to make that happen and moving them into more light-based activities as well. But you have kind of the same thing as that Schrodinger's cat, right? You put the cat in the box with the poison and you don't know if it's alive or dead until you open the box. Same thing with qubits. They are taking on all possible values until the moment that you interact with it, and then it solidifies. And so the trick is to take that property to be able to get the right combination to the lock, as it were.
It kind of proves that quantum physics is real, because people sometimes think it's just a mathematical model and the reality is still discrete or rather deterministic. And in this case, we have a kind of a proof that we are going through all possible paths, right, in all superpositions, because we can compute something with it, which otherwise wouldn't be possible. But do you believe in the quantum supremacy, as it's called, that it was achieved actually? Do you believe that when Google announces that they made a computation which would take a normal supercomputer a million years, do you think they're right, or it's too early to say?
No, they probably did. I've got no reason to doubt that they're incorrect about that. The literature I've been able to read on it indicates that they were, but it doesn't cover all cases at the same time either, right? You've still got to program code to take advantage of that. And that's, a human endeavor currently and prone to errors and problems.
Yeah. The biggest problem is decoherence, right? The fact that these atoms are in you have to keep them in quantum state and then not interfere with it in any way, and good luck with that, right? Like performing computations. And
Microsoft's come out with a quantum chip recently that helps with a lot of that error correction that might happen from degradation.
Yeah, although I read some stuff about saying that there might be they might not achieve that, they overblow results. But we are getting there. There's a lot of investments in quantum computing. Coming back to the cryptography application, as you said, in traditional RSA algorithm and other algorithms, the question is that to solve it, you need to factorize a big number, right? You need to a factorization, for people who don't know, it's finding the numbers which will, by multiplying them together, will create that number, and these numbers have to be prime numbers, right? So you have to be divisible only by itself and by 1. So this is very difficult to do manually or on computer, even if you have millions of operations. But it's very easy, or not easy, very easy, but because you can do it in parallel on superpositions, let's say, you can achieve it on quantum computers. So our entire cryptography systems are dependent on it, and we are now about to be screwed and have no security whatsoever. So what is happening? What is the solution? Is it even addressed? Do everybody accept that this is going to be a case and we are moving to it, or will we, like with the year 2000 problem, like suddenly scrambling about with the code, trying to fix issues?
For sure, it's just going to happen, and we know that it's going to happen. And there's actually 4 encryption algorithms that NIST has selected for publication for the U.S. government to use as a post-quantum, quantum-resistant algorithm, which means that the quantum computer can't instantly break it, but it can still run on a regular computer. So you can run it today, you can install it. They're encouraging everyone to install these newer algorithms to do the encryption with, because it will safeguard things against being attacked and decrypted later when that capability comes to full fruition. Right now, China's just been stocking up on all the data that they can steal, encrypted or not, because their expectation is they'll be able to decrypt it. And the question is, at that point, is that data news or history?
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting point. I didn't think about it. So basically, what you're saying is that China is actively collecting hashed passwords, databases, and so on, to the moment until they can break it.
Probably not hashed passwords, because who cares? That's probably going to change by the time they can easily deal with it. But encrypted data files.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
So you can decrypt it. You don't need to actually have the
encrypted communications, which again may or may not be worth anything by the time they get around to decrypting them. But they'll be able to decrypt it, within the next decade or so, I would expect, as opposed to, in a million years.
Yeah, million years and a decade is a little bit different from human perspective.
Yeah.
And then they can run some AI over that data instead of getting people to read it and find something interesting.
For sure. That capability is crazy new and full of possibilities.
Yeah, so that is fascinating. So maybe let's dig a little bit deeper into this. So you can today actually download algorithms. Like there are standards already. This is already a proposed standard or a standard?
So there's 3 actual standardized algorithms. The first one's the ML-KEM, and then there's the ML-DSA, and there's the SCH-DSA. And they have fun names too. That's Crystals Kyber and Crystals Dilithium and Sphinx. But those first ones are the official designations now. Those were the kind of operating names that the people who were developing the algorithms came up with. So I guess there's some science fiction fans in there.
Yeah, and Sphinx, that's an interesting one. That doesn't sound too positive.
Well, the Sphinx is the keeper of riddles, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. So these algorithms, I could install them, but are they as easy to run as traditional RSA based, let's say, or they take more computational power?
Well, they're more are based around synchronous encryption, and they are easy to run. It's a library you install, and your computer starts using it. The idea is to get everyone using it, particularly for internet traffic and file storage and that type of thing. I don't remember if there's a strong public key encryption capability yet that you can do without being more or less physically close to each other. To be able to do a private key between 2 or people, you've got to have a stream of photons that can exchange with each other unobserved and uninterrupted. If it gets perturbed during the process, like if somebody is sniffing the wire and trying to read the data transaction, the key process will fail.
Mm-hmm. I heard recently, at least about Poland. Well, actually, I heard in Poland there was news that quantum entanglement and therefore quantum communication was possible to be transported. I mean, they did it in practice over a regular internet infrastructure, like regular wire, let's say. Also, China achieved the transport quantum transportation to a satellite, which is very scary. That's like that basically opens any distances, right? US is doing the same, I hope, and we're hope the best in the world still, or
Yeah. It's a little different from radio, where you would take a broadcast and you can rain it down onto the entire like US from a satellite.
yeah.
Like XM radio, right? So there's more point-to-point communications capabilities, which is great in theory. You can have them as far apart, so we could take that satellite, send it off to Alpha Centauri, and immediately communicate with it once it arrives instantaneously. But it's got to get there first,
Mm-hmm.
and it's got to stay entangled that whole time, right?
Yeah.
So there's problems associated with it, and we're very early in the stages. But I think AI is going to certainly help a lot, and has been helping a lot, and to help move quantum computing forward. I think quantum computing is also helping the AI move forward. So we've got this nice gestalt going that's snowballing the effects.
Yeah, yeah. You used kind of a controversial term here from physics perspective, which I like, because I always said that this is useful. So whenever I discuss with physicists, they say there is no faster than light communication thanks to entanglement. Well, yes, but in case of quantum cryptography, it's okay that we start here, then we move the object somewhere, right? Then we move it to the person who needs the key, and then it is encrypted and impossible to break. That's good enough. We don't need to move that object with the speed of light, right? So the physicality or the physical limit of light speed is okay here, and still we are using the quantum entanglement, and it's impossible to break. It's completely do you know any way to break it? This I heard that this is a completely impossible to break at all.
Yeah. So if you interfere with what's going on between those two objects, you break the entanglement,
Yeah. So that's it.
and you're done.
Yeah.
So it creates a problem, as like the key generation I was alluding to earlier. If you observe and try to, kind of man in the middle and duplicate everything as it's going by, you disturb the stream and it fails.
Yeah. Man in the middle, by the way, is one of the forms of attack, right? Like you have Alice and Bob talking, and there is someone in the middle who is listening to the conversation and trying to figure it out, either decrypted or.
Yeah, you've got to go back to the more traditional man in the middle, where Charlie's talking to Bob pretending to be Alice, and he's talking to Alice pretending to be Bob, and so he's handling the communications chain between them, and they both think they're talking to each other when they're actually talking to Charlie.
But that's exactly man in the middle. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So you think this will happen? Would you recommend for people, like I have this startup, right? I will have to have some security on it. Normally, what I would do, I would just rely on the existing security infrastructure for loggings and so on. Is it a time to already implement this kind of encryptions already? So you would say like, now if you're developing a system, when you have a login, a private and public keys, then you should use post-quantum libraries already, or it's too early?
No, you should definitely be using them already. At least
Mm.
if you don't want somebody to be able to decrypt it later.
That is so interesting. So the community, cybersecurity community, says you should start doing it right now, not like think about it in the future when we have a fast enough quantum computer.
No, again, we go back to the problem of China snapping up all the data that's being done with our traditional AES encryption, right? So they've got the file, it's encrypted. Even the ransomware guys have got files that are encrypted, that they've re-encrypted using, when they were trying to ransomware you. Later on, they'll be able to decrypt that. Now, is that going to be information when they decrypt it, or is it just going to be history at that point? And
Oh, I'm sure in many cases it's information.
right, and your social security number is not going to change. Your date of birth, your personal bio information is not going to change over that period of time. So that's still information that could be used. And it might be your business plans. It might be plans on how to make something that a competitor might be finding useful.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I've never thought about it this way. I thought it's a current security problem, like logging to a bank, but bank can switch the login to the new system.
Mhm.
The problem is somebody stole the data which was encrypted, so they can't read it from the bank 10 years, 20 years ago, and now suddenly, boom, all the SSNs and more important even information than that, right, is gone. Do you know if companies are actually re-encrypting their data sets already, or they ignore the threat?
That's all kind of all over the board. So
Mm.
some of the wiser organizations are already doing that. Adding in the algorithms isn't the issue. Being able to, if you're doing symmetric encryption, talking to a web server, for example, if that web server doesn't have the algorithm, then you can't use it,
Oh, yeah.
right? So, but if you already have it installed and then somebody goes and puts it on that web server and it's defaulting to that, then voila, you're already there.
Mhm. Yeah, but I don't know. I'm using many servers. I am using AWS. I'm using Google cloud infrastructure. I'm using hosting websites and so on. I've never seen, at least from my perspective, whenever I want to do SSH into it, my key is RSA.
Mhm.
So that's big companies, and I'm still using RSA to log in.
Sure. RSA is doing the initial handshake, though, but then once you've got that identity established, it's switching back to a symmetric algorithm.
Oh, so it is happening, likely.
RSA is slow. It's very slow. It's really good to set up an encrypted tunnel, right? So you set up your encrypted communications, but you need to identify that I'm me and you're you. The RSA algorithm allows us to do that by sharing public keys and private keys.
Yeah.
But if we want to have a quick communications capability, you need to then use that to exchange a symmetric key,
Mm-hmm.
switch to symmetric encryption, and then you can keep changing that symmetric key as needed.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So basically, the first handshake, as you call it, so first authorization establishment of ID is done by RSA. And then if you were using RSA to encrypt everything you're sending, that would be tremendously slow. So you basically switch to symmetric.
Right. And you can also use it to encrypt files. So I could encrypt a file or sign a file, and then I can send it to everyone in the world, and they can use my public key to validate that it hasn't been changed and that it came from me. So symmetric wouldn't work there. And if I have to send the file to a whole bunch of people at the same time, individual symmetric keys might not be the right answer. But if I have everyone's public key, I can encrypt I can encrypt the file for each one of them separately and send it to them, and they have it in perpetuity and their ability to decrypt it and look at it as long as they have their private key. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is actually also very interesting, right? You use somebody's public key to make sure that only that person who has the private key can read that file. So you protect that file for a specific person. Yeah. But that is still not post-quantum. So do you think these big servers actually do anything already? Because I don't see it, right? Like when I log into, as I said, to any of these services, they the algorithms they're using of what I am exposed to, what I see. For example, for SSH login, um, is always either RSA or how is it called, EAS, right? Something like this. So these are the algorithms used. Do you know if people are adopting the? You said that this depends, but I don't see it, right? Like you would think that AWS is doing it, right? And it doesn't seem so. Like Amazon doesn't seem so, from my client perspective.
yeah, so it's kind of like when you're going through the SSL versions and then to the TLC or TLS rather versions. If both parties aren't up on the latest, you can't use the latest. So maybe they have that capability and you don't, so you're not going to see it. So until you put it in on your system.
Oh, that's a very good point. So what I should really check is whether there's an option where I have to update my clients,
Mhm.
right, on my machine to be able to log in for the post-quantum. Yeah, I'm a computer scientist and I don't know this stuff. So this is very interesting and I should have known it. Yeah, Shari, know that.
Hopefully, the Linux distributions and Microsoft and Apple will start setting those as part of the patching process and make it available, and at some point maybe make it the default.
Yeah, exactly. That would need to be default because who is going to change their OpenSSL? I don't even know what is TL. The updated SSL version 1.21. Like I know they exist, these versions, but I don't know exactly which one should I use, why, and there's always a problem. And using the newest one, something doesn't work, So yeah, that's very interesting. So we are entering a very interesting era.
Mm-hmm.
Very well, if it's well managed, it will be a smooth transition, but it's unlikely that it will be well managed worldwide.
Yeah, and we run into the same problem with that SSL TLS transition, right? We've had web servers that were running SSL 3 because there was some customer in South America somewhere who was still using like an old Windows XP system and couldn't use TLS and was still using SSL version 3. And then what are you going to do? You can either cut them off or continue to run with that weakness. And that's where a lot of cybersecurity problems start happening. We keep running with these weaknesses, which allows a bad guy to then come in and force the server to start using that, downgrade the encryption because I can't do it when I really can. And then it kind of breaks it for everybody in some cases when you do it the right way.
Yeah, the same applies for any kind of Wi-Fi connections and so on, right? The lowest security guy is the vulnerability for everybody.
That's right.
So yeah, this is interesting. So, but let's move on to more traditional cybersecurity issues, which are also still a big threat and problem. So I had I always wondered, how does it actually work? How hackers actually break into system? What did they use? It looks in the movies, it looks cool, right? It's like a guy who the one requirement is you have to type really fast. So it's like this is all about typing, right? Like this.
Well, there's three basic ways to break into a computer system. One is social engineering, right? You trick somebody to take an action on your behalf that opens things up for them, whether that's sending them a phishing email or redirecting them to a website where they type in their password for you so you can capture it and then use it. So we'll set that one aside because that's usually not a fast process like what you see in the movies. The movies, they're trying to break in and they don't necessarily have time to send emails to somebody and hope they click on it. Then there's just flaws in the code that they can take advantage of. So there's been a few in the news recently and a lot over the number of years where you can search the internet if you figure out where the flaw is, like a buffer overflow, which is where a buffer is like a storage space for a product or input in a computer. You can think of it as like an egg crate, and it will hold a dozen eggs. And if you put 14 eggs in there, where do those extra 2 eggs go? Right? So when you overflow a buffer, those extra 2 eggs fall outside the buffer if you don't properly code things. And if you put the right pieces in, you can make that executable code that the computer then executes depending on where it hits in the memory when it overflows. Some things are well known as to where that buffer is going to be and where that execution might then occur. When that happens, you can take advantage of that to make the computer then execute some malware or a backdoor and open things up for you.
And for those who are developers, by buffer overflow attack, you mean that it will be really a dynamic array where you can like fill out the data as much as you want, and you override it. You take more than was allocated for you. And so if you, for example, use a static array, that shouldn't be possible, right? This kind of operating system should protect from that.
Sanitation of the input is always important. SQL injections take advantage of the fact that maybe I can put whatever I want into the field without doing a buffer overflow, but I'm putting a SQL command in. Well, that answer shouldn't contain those special characters for the SQL command, and so that should be sanitized before it even hits the server to be processed because, maybe I'm telling it to crop the users table. Well, that could be a problem. It might crash the whole database.
Yeah, or you can copy the user, give me the users there, select all users, including
or change me to admin.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, SQL is a language for database interaction, and it lets you query databases, right? So you can do that. Another form of this code injection used to be Java code injection into JavaScript code injection into HTML, right? You could run whatever code you wanted by input field.
Yeah, we've also got cross-site injection, which is basically I managed to put something on the server that makes you go to my server and get the code that I want to feed you to run on your computer, which is, of course, going to be malicious.
Hmm. Yeah, one time I actually experienced that, and it was the dumbest thing I ever did in my life. It was like so stupid. It's unbelievable. But still, I went for it, and it was after I studied computer science. So when I was traveling, I was in Brazil for a while, and I put my laptop for sale because I needed money. I was like doing a documentary, and I really needed, I wanted to sell my laptop quickly so I get some money. I was like poor student traveling on low budget, and I talked to someone online, like I like met a lot of people and talked to many people on Skype back then. And there was a girl who recommended that I use Mercado Livre, which is the Brazilian eBay. And I said, "Oh, I never heard about it. Okay, I will do it. I will do it." So she sent me a link. So I put my laptop on Mercado Livre, sold it. The money went to PayPal. I didn't see it on my PayPal yet, but it clearly said on the website that it's like 2 days wait and the money are on the way. So I sent the laptop to the address of the buyer, right? And then money never came. What I found out is that she sent me Mercado Livre with one letter misspelled. Instead of B, it was V. And, in Spanish and Portuguese, this is like exchangeable. And I literally created, this was a system must have been created earlier, not just for my laptop. I created my account. I gave them some password, hopefully not a useful one. I created my posting, sold my laptop. All of this was BS. And they got the laptop, never paid me the money. And this is like I studied even cryptography, right? This is amazing how efficient this attack was. So it must have been very professional, the group of people who did it.
It is. It happens all the time. That's another form of social engineering. I'm going to send you a fake website that looks like the one you're going to.
Exactly.
Or typo squatting is also very popular. The one of the most popular ones for the last 30 years has been whitehouse.com versus whitehouse.gov.
Uh-huh.
I have received multiple times early in the 90s people calling me up and letting me know that the White House has been hacked, which I didn't work there, so I'm not sure what they thought I was going to do about that, but they would typed in whitehouse.com instead of whitehouse.gov. So doing stuff like that, or using lookalike letters when I communicate with you, or even as an ad on Google Ads, or any other ad serving situation that I can take out an ad. It may only run for a day before they figure it out and take it down, but during that day, how many people might click on it?
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like a legitimate website. I've cloned the original website to fake you out, and that's all about taking you to the wrong place.
Yeah, recently our university runs this kind of pretend phishing attacks to educate us. But and they get better and better, more sophisticated. Like I would say, like 1 in 10 times I'm hooked on it, and which is pretty bad, right? 1 in 10 times of somebody who is aware of this is pretty bad because if I get 300 emails and somebody asks something like click here to file a survey about your work environment, and they're like, you just got caught, you didn't mean that, right? But I think it's still not like what is surprising is it's still not sophisticated enough. So if I was planning an attack like this, right, I would write an email from a dean. Everybody will open the email from a dean, but these emails are usually, I am like the most typical one, the Nigerian scam, right? The famous Nigerian scam is like, well, I inherited $1 billion, and you will get 2% if you help me to transfer it to US. Like, who goes for that? So why do you think is this? Is it based on psychology that people there you always find the person who will go for this kind of phishing attacks?
It's really more on the odds. So a lot of times when we do these phishing tests, they're based on things that are actually happening in the real world right now. People will frequently click on, here's the bonus spreadsheet for the company.
Uh-huh.
So the trick is being able to get it past the mail gateway and through. And it's an odds game. How much does it cost to send an email?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can send 1 million emails out.
Yeah.
If I get a 1%, 0.5% clicking on it, that's a lot of people still, right?
Yep.
And so it's just a numbers game at this point. Who can you find that's going to be gullible or maybe distracted? Or have you created the right sense of urgency at the right time for that particular person? So a good example is I'm getting ready to go to a meeting. I get an email from the person that I'm about to meet with that needs my signature on an Adobe sign. Only we don't use Adobe Sign, we use VeriSign. And I think to myself, well, that's ridiculous. They know we don't do this. And I click on the thing, and then it starts asking me for passwords, and I need to be whoa,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I should go ask about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's created urgency. You're distracted. You're in a hurry, right?
Yeah.
All the right pieces come together at the right moment to do that. And if I send out 1 million, 2 million, 5 million emails, what are the odds that I'm going to hit a few people who are in that right state of mind at any given point in time?
Yeah, but how do you protect from that? Because that's exactly the problem, right? Like if you send a million emails, there will be definitely someone who is tired, was not careful in this very moment. So how do you deal with this kind of attacks? It will be efficient. Seems like it will be efficient forever.
Right. Well, I mean, if it's too good to be true, it probably is, right? So that's a good start right there. So those Nigerian scams, you should be able to spot a mile away.
Yeah, well, right now, almost nobody will go for them because we all received. I even once had a fun to track them down. Like I send them back a response that I'm very interested, and here is all my data, and this was my website which I created. So I got the IP address, and I look up the IP address and found that they are in Lagos, right? And then I scare them a little bit, but that's like minimum level fun with this.
Mm.
But the yeah, but these attacks don't work. But the attacks, like the typical attack which I would be prone to would be like um, from a company I know, or pretending from a company I know. Like let's say Norton is very common, right?
Mm.
You got an invoice from Norton for another annual antiviral subscription, and I'm like, I switched to whatever, right? No, I don't pay Norton anymore. So I'm like opening it, angry to the company that they charged me $600, right? And that's an attack. So what I mean is, like, is there any way other than being diligent to prevent it?
So being diligent's a part of it. Who's it coming from really? Look at that email address for real. Right. And
Well, nortonsolutions.com or norton invoicing.com.
yeah,
There is always an address you can buy.
well, sometimes it's coming from some Gmail account too, though, right? So that can
Yeah.
tip you off. You switched.
Mhm.
You immediately gotten angry and want to react. The first thing you should do is stop, take a deep breath.
Yeah.
Maybe go get a glass of water and come back in and analyze the situation, right? If it's already happened, it's already happened. Your reacting quick isn't going to change that. The other thing is, like, a lot of times they'll do the same thing with sales. So if you're missing out, this is limited time only.
Oh yeah.
Go here right away to get this discount. Otherwise, in 10 minutes, it'll be gone. Well, okay. One, they're pushing you. So there's urgency there. So again, take a deep breath, calm down, relax, and evaluate the situation. And then open another browser, go to the website, because if it's really a sale, it's going to be available on their website and you don't have to click through the email. Maybe there's a code you need to type in to the website to get the coupon, right? But you don't need to use the link that's in that email.
Yeah.
So just, taking that deep breath and relaxing for a moment, and it's clearly evaluating the situation before clicking on those links is going to bring you a long way towards avoiding them.
Yeah, but you're still counting on people being perfect, not being people. So it seems impossible to resolve. I was wondering if AI would help with it. I would like to have like a little AI observing my email and say, like, don't open this. This is like 90% likely, like a 90% likely phishing.
So that's kind of a feature that's available for a lot of larger companies that are using an email gateway to go through their emails before they come into the organization. And they'll put those tags on there. You'll see it's like, this is from outside an organization. You've never spoken with this individual before. You've never interacted with this company before. So those warnings are useful and helpful, but it hasn't really gotten down to the individual person level.
Mhm.
The stay-at-home mom or the kid in high school, or the retiree who's hanging out, or the stay-at-home dad for that matter. You're going to get this email, and maybe Google has started to put in Yahoo some warnings on there for things that it's finding, and their algorithms are using AI to find those spam. And then as you report that spam, which is important, if you see it and it comes in as clearly spam, hit that spam button because it helps them learn.
Yeah, I always do that. But I don't know, this is a very good note for everybody to do that, right? It's one click for you and you're saving potentially a successful attack. On the other hand, for example, our email guard in universities is ridiculous. It so doesn't work. I find emails from the dean or from administration in the protected, in the area where you have to check that this email was quarantined. That's crazy, right? Or valid emails from other researchers from other universities go there. So hopefully AI will be smarter than that and will not do these basic mistakes, because this is actually very annoying to miss some email and then finding it either in spam folder or in these quarantine folders. But I was thinking about one attack which I it was successful on me to a degree, because I realized quickly that it was an attack. So it was someone broke into my friend's email at the university, and they were sending email from their account, right? So the only reason I realized was because the email was kind of weird. Like basically the person said like, "Oh, I feel so sick today." I'm like, "Why would you tell me that you're sick? It's just, we're friends, but you don't normally tell me that you are sick." So I was like, "Oh, I hope you are getting better." It's like, "No, I'm really, I need money." I'm like, "Oh, you need money. Yeah. You're a professor like me. You don't need, $50 to send to wherever you are pretending to be right now." So I contacted the guy other way, and he's like, "Oh my God, no, of course I didn't send it." Right. So it was a problem of login and password. Somebody guessed it with dictionary attack or something, right? But imagine that it was an agentic AI writing this email, not some not very smart guy. He could have analyzed the content of our conversations, follow up on the conversation, and design it in such a way that I would never discover it. It would take me forever. It would be like, "Oh, we worked on this project. Here is the results," and I'm like definitely clicking the results, right?
Yeah.
So this seems to be there seems to be like a future of agentic an evil agentic AIs fighting the good agentic AIs defending you. It's really feels like it's coming.
Yeah, and it's to an extent already here in that, I mean, what you're talking about is really kind of a business email compromise situation, or in this case, a university email compromise. Um, but you could already use an LLM to take a bunch. So you're broken into the email account. You can grab a bunch of those emails from that conversation, feed it to the LLM, and say, write me a response to this, and then add in whatever malicious link you want to put in. You can even tell the LLM, hey, um, respond to this and identify that I found this cool website that they should check out as part of the message. So now they come back with an email that looks like it came from you, sounds like it came from you, with a link that you're probably going to trust to click on. And we do frequently, when you're internal like that, it doesn't go back through those filters to protect you either. So that's kind of the best case scenario. But it also brings up the third type of compromise that happens, which is configuration issues.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what are we going to do about those emails? So we're going to have those, AI agents working on our side as well to hopefully identify, and maybe go do a pre-check on some of those links for us internally when that happens. But if we had things configured properly, they wouldn't have been able to take over the account and get into the email.
So you think that's another good point. The security is there. It's usually the human error, setup error, configuration error that leads to that. It's not a question of the technology existing. It's a question of mistakes in use of technology.
Yeah. So there's default settings for a lot of the services that we use these days. Snowflake's a really good example. AWS and the S3 buckets are another really good example. How many years were we going through where it was every other day you were hearing about an S3 bucket being compromised because it was open to the internet?
Hmm.
Well, that was happening because the default, when you created an S3 bucket in AWS to share files with or to collect data with, by default, it made it open to the entire world.
People didn't know that, and they were doing it.
Yeah, but they did it because they wanted it to be ease of use, right? we want to make money, and we're going to make money as fast as we can. And so we don't want to create any kind of friction or any barriers to slow people down in making that happen. So we don't want to make that S3 bucket going through 4 questions, 5 questions to set it up properly. We just want you to click it once and now it's available. And then you can go back and fix the security, except most people don't know anything about that, or running the systems. IT operations management and cybersecurity are fairly specialized still. And constantly changing. And then until we get to a point where it's not in this constant state of flux and change, it's going to have to be a specialized space. But there's still things we can do about it. Snowflake had the same issue. They didn't put MFA as a requirement for new accounts when you set it up. They're doing that now, but we kept seeing every week different companies that were being compromised because they were breaking into their Snowflake account because all they had to do was get the password.
Yeah.
And we like to reuse passwords, right?
Yeah. Well, I understand MFA is important, but personally, it's just so annoying because I never keep my phone close by. I don't respond. Don't want to be bothered, right? So first of all, it's either dead, or the battery's out, or it is somewhere, and I don't know where. And then I log in anywhere, and I always ask to confirm on my phone. So I feel like I hate it. On the other hand, I think it's very important nowadays. Otherwise. But actually, let's actually dig into it, because if I have very complicated password, are the dictionary attacks better now? Like, why is it suddenly? Why was it more or less secure or secure for years when you had a good password? Not password, and not password 123, but actual password with a lot of signs in it and different characters and symbols. That seems that's still unbreakable, and yet we are required to do the two-factor authorization. And anyways, what are there specific reasons for that?
Well, it's getting easier and easier to break longer passwords because of the speeds and the ability to parallelize the process, right? I can dump it into AWS and have 10,000 computers working on it quickly.
So now this kind of breaks are actually somewhat doable for at least a portion of the...
Sure. But the other thing is, remember we were talking before about those fake websites where you put in your password. Well, now I've got your password. It's 23 characters long with crazy characters and maybe even non-Anglican character sets in it. But guess what? I have it.
Yeah.
And are you using it elsewhere?
Oh, exactly. This is like everybody's problem, right? We have 500 logins and we use very similar. I have only 2 types of passwords: the very secure password and the okay password. I mean, both are secure passwords, but I use them in so many websites that in one is compromised, all of them are compromised.
Yeah, that's where our password manager comes in handy. Plugs into your browser. You can have it on your phone, so you can look up that password, copy and paste the password into the website. And this way you can have different passwords at every website. But really what we need to do is get rid of them. Yeah, just get rid of them. We've got keys that we can use now. We've got multi-factor capabilities using our phones and our biometrics that are tied into our phones to validate and authenticate ourselves. Because passwords are just terrible. If they're really strong, they're really hard to remember, and you've got to do something about that. And if they're not, and you're using them elsewhere, then they're also super easy for people to get. But there's some forms of multi-factor that are less good than others. For example, SMS is generally pretty good, but I had a friend whose wife's 401k account got wiped out. They eventually got it fixed, but they had convinced Verizon to SIM swap her phone. So they were able to get the multi-factor code, because they'd already gotten her password, to identify that this is my phone. Right? And they were able to take all the money out.
So what is the alternative to SMS for two-factor authorizations? This push notifications are better?
Definitely, because you need the phone. Someone could steal your phone and do it, but that's harder. They could clone your phone and do it. Still harder, right? Somebody in Nigeria is going to have a hard time cloning my phone here in the U.S. My next door neighbor, on the other hand, he could probably do it.
You have to physically connect to the phone to clone it, or you can do it
close.
So
depends on your phone's configuration, right? Can I get access to your phone in order to do that?
Interesting. So yeah, so you can do it over Wi-Fi or Bluetooth?
I can do it over the internet if I can get you to click on the right thing. Right? But
yeah,
again, that's a lot of effort. There's still so much easy stuff to do that a lot of times people don't do it. And SIM swapping's easy, right? That's why it happens so often. They're able to convince the phone carriers, especially outside the U.S., to swap that SIM card.
So you mean that if you have any security set up on a phone number that is not US phone number, then you are already at a higher risk because
Well, it depends on who your carrier is. I can have a U.S. phone number, but have a carrier out of a different country potentially, right? Because I can go get a SIM card and set up an account with them.
Mhm.
So
That's so interesting. I never thought about like this level of security. This is this is getting scary.
well,
Or
it all comes down to what can I do to steal your money, and people who have a lot of time and no money can do these things because they're not going to a job. Their job is to be a criminal.
how relevant is that kind of thing? Is it like is it millions of cases, thousands of cases? Do you know if it is like common to that people lose it?
It's common, happens all the time, which is one of the reasons why NIST says you really shouldn't use SMS for that type of thing anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, email, which is also not necessarily so great, is better than using SMS because in theory, you've got better control over your email account than you do over your ability to control whether or not Verizon gives your phone number over to somebody else's phone.
Yeah, but if
They
you
use a
use
SIM card.
but if you use the same password for your email and for your system which you're logging to, the guys have both right now. So
Well, it's a bit of a problem, but uh, it's something we're going to have to work through.
mhm.
Uh,
And this is independent of the quantum revolution. This is basically people becoming more and more sophisticated in these attacks. And I really like my biggest worry is the agentic AI. It's like you basically, until now, you had to be a smart hacker, learn all of this. And now you just download. I know there are software for hackers. So it's really also a click maybe, but they're still limited, right? If you have an AI which figures out new ways of attack, which nobody thought about earlier, like 0 days attacks, right? This will be a huge problem. You drop a code and say like, what is the 0-day attack on this code? So
Right. Yeah. How can I crack this code right away? That's definitely a possibility, but you've got to get the source code to do that. I mean,
yeah,
clearly that's a little easier with open source than closed source, but breaking into companies and stealing their data doesn't seem to be a problem for a lot of bad guys right now.
yeah. When I had a startup in 10 years ago, we had a server which was very much used. Our biggest problem, and we were a small startup, we were not, making a lot of money. Like it was not a big, it was not a valuable target. Yet we had daily hundreds of thousands of attacks attempts from China. Hundreds of thousands per day, every day, all the time. It was crazy. Like on AWS, we just saw this, in the logs, like attack, try to check. Yeah, we were not very well protected. There are ways to protect yourself from this, but we're a small startup with like one server, right? But it is fascinating that it is possible and it's happening kind of hidden.
Yeah. It goes back to the fact that computers are really fast. People are pretty slow. I ran into a situation one time where we had a server on the internet and we would transition to the new server and the old server was still up and running. We'd moved the DNS over and it got hit by a 0-day. And my boss said to me, she said, how did they know it was there? I'm like, I didn't know it was there. Well, then how did they hack it? Well, it's the internet. Everything has an address and it's a fixed number range.
Yeah.
Right. So you just hit every IP address on the internet and try it out.
Mm-hmm.
It's a shotgun approach.
Yeah.
You just keep doing it until you find the stuff. And that's happened a few times over the last few years where these 0 days have come out and the bad guys have gone out and hit everything they could on the internet before they start sending out the ransom notes, right? Collect everything you can. And now instead of getting a few companies and then everybody patches really quick, you get hundreds of companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I don't understand how this attack's even possible in the first place, because if I wanted to set up an attack on all the internet addresses, I would be let's say I run it on my computer there,
Mhm.
right? IPS will the internal provider will block me if after 1,000 or 10,000, whatever it is. Uh, I would need to have thousands of computers. So how is that even happening? Like why there is like no note to China saying once again it happens and we cut you off the American internet.
So
It's very naive, I know, but
no, it's a great question, and it is perplexing. Remember how you were talking about how you're getting attacked? This computer that's basically worth nothing. It's a computer though, and it's on the internet.
yeah. And it is in China. I mean, I know it. It shows me Chinese
Maybe.
IP address.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So here's the thing: I could take over your computer and put it into my botnet, and I do that to hundreds, thousands of people.
Yeah.
Now I have 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, 100,000 machines that I can have spray the internet. So instead of seeing one computer from the US attacking, everything on the internet, you see 10,000 computers attacking a handful of computers each.
And from all over the place. So, yeah. And then you get a visit by FBI. Why did you attack this server? Like, what?
Right. And this problem that, that you said you saw all coming from China is a lot of the folks who have computers in China haven't been traditionally doing a good job of keeping them up to date. And so they're easy to hack. And you've got to remember, a lot of these organizations aren't an organization. It's a dozen organizations. So you've got a guy who specializes in botnet. So they're making botnets, and there's a few others that are making botnets. And then you've got a girl whose primary skill set is taking over accounts. So you've got access capabilities. All right. And you've got another organization who's really good at maybe finding 0 days. They spend a lot of time just poking at software to see what they can make happen and find these problems. You've got others that are really good at deploying that ransomware. Right. And then you've got another group that's really good at storing all that in a location, getting it off the network, exfiltrating it out. And then you've got another one like Clop, who's a big name in this, who's really good at posting that stuff up on the website and ransoming that stuff. All these organizations are independent of each other, but they get together, kind of like doing a construction project, right? You get the guy who pours the cement, you get the guy who does the foundation work, you get the guy who's doing all the electrical work, the plumbing, right? There are all these different people who contribute to an overall project of building this house. They're building an overall project of ransomwaring a bunch of companies and getting a bunch of money, and everyone gets a piece of the pie. So botnets, they're valuable. Your computer, any computer, your IoT devices, your phone, whatever, they're all valuable pieces of real estate, not because maybe there's something important or there's money on them that they can use, but it's a device they can use to attack with.
Yeah, this is fascinating. And how do these people organize it? This is like a part of a dark net? Is it like they communicate on a signal or something? Or can you like find it? Like if you go to darknet, if you go to Onion website, do you Google like attack on bank or something, and they are there or something like this?
So it's funny. There are, on the darknet, there are ads for, the services that these people can provide, and you can go contract with them. They also have help desks, right? So I want to buy some ransomware software. Well, rent it really, right? I'm just going to, rent it and attack 10,000. They're going to take a percentage as part of my rent of that software, but they'll help me set up the phishing email. They'll help me get it sent out, and they'll help me make sure that I have a great experience as an evil-doing bad guy, right? To make them money.
So you get better customer experience when you are dealing with a ransom attack than you get if you call some without naming carriers.
No, and it's you've got big organizations and individuals that are doing these types of things, and the bigger organizations are funny because they're just like companies. They've got employees who are working on doing those things that day in, day out. They're complaining about not enough vacation time, sick leave, right? Too many hours.
Yeah, I was involved in this cybersecurity attack for the last 2 days. I haven't slept. I need my vacation now.
Yeah.
Like sick. Is it? Is there any of these organizations are in U.S. Or it is always abroad and not in Western countries, or is?
Well, there's a lot of them that are not in the U.S., but there might be individuals that are participating with those organizations, but most of them are outside the jurisdiction of the U.S., although individual members might be.
And so they don't even care because they will be not under the jurisdiction, which would punish them for it.
Well,
Theoretically.
theoretically, but what we're seeing and what we need is a lot more international cooperation to take down organizations like that.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen that recently where we've got like 23 countries working together to do a sting operation across those countries to take down the servers, take down the people all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you start nibbling, things move.
Uh-huh.
Take these servers down. Oh, all of a sudden the servers are in another country
Uh-huh.
because they're VMs, right? You can just spin up a new one or move them somewhere else.
Yeah, that's another term, virtual machine, right? You can basically create multiple servers on the same hardware, and just for a while, just for a moment, and then again, not to do this. This is fascinating hidden world, which even though I'm computer scientist, I don't know much about. I tried once a Tor network, Tor browser to see how it works. This was developed in Canada, right? If I remember correctly.
I'll have to take your word for it. It's been a long time.
Yeah, so that's like a browser which was used for accessing the darknet. But this is very dangerous. This is like you might think it's exciting. It's very dangerous. It's as these people are.
So Tor stands for
So
the onion network, and so the concept behind it is you're peeling the layers of the onion. So I go to an anonymous node with an encrypted connection, and then from there I make an encrypted connection to another anonymous node, and from there another encryption connection to a third anonymous node, and I can go more if I want. But then I exit out of that node, and I can maybe go and do things, and it looks like it's coming from someplace completely different in the world, and it's really hard to trace it back to me. It's slow though, because you got multiple layers of encryption going on. So you need a little bit of patience, but
yeah.
criminals are looking for a lot of times the slow game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is also another side of this coin, right? Whenever we talk about this, there is also a positive use of this kind of things. For example, people living in a oppressive under oppressive regimes have the way to, for example, pass information to journalists by using these multi-layer encryptions and not be tracked down. There is like this drop boxes there in different news organizations have set up, but I think there are safer ways to do it, like maybe a Signal. I don't know if Signal is still considered safe, or Telegram. Telegram is basically, it looks like a Russian operation to me. But I don't know if it was started in Russia, I think, right? Something like this. So there is ways to do that, but it's always two-sided coin. So going to this topic a little bit, we had I don't know how much we can talk about it. So we had this we have this problem of balance between being surveillance by government and being kept safe. And there were recent in the past there were examples when there was overreach of government on surveillancing people without proper authorization from courts. What do you think about it? Do you think, like, what is more important, like the protection? Because let me give you my opinion first, so it doesn't sound like I'm like putting you on the spot. I am very pro free speech and freedom, but I honestly think, like, if you're tracking a terrorist and you listen to my phone calls to track that terrorist for some reason, I'm fine with it. I'm like, okay, like my privacy is important, but I can sacrifice my privacy for a greater good of tracking some terrorists. So this idea that it's like, they never touch anything, like never ever do anything, and then something blows up. I don't know. I'm like, I would be a little bit relaxed about it. Do you think it's too much? So
It's a complicated question, and it has a lot to do with the individual and the societies that they live in as to whether or not you want freedom or safety, because you can't have both.
yeah.
In order to have safety, you have to give up certain levels of freedom, and some organizations or people, countries are less willing to give up some of those freedoms than others. So you've got in the UK, you've got street cameras watching people as they're walking down the street looking for pickpockets and things like that. That also means that, John Doe's walking down the street and going to a house of ill repute and being caught on video.
Mhm.
Um, you know, what's going to happen with that information? What if somebody in the law enforcement who just made up of people like you and me, we've seen it before, decides that they want to make a little side money and starts extorting them,
Mhm.
right? I mean, hopefully that'll come out, it'll get caught and punished appropriately. But the real question is, where do you want to draw that line as a nation, as a city?
Yeah. And we have a guinea pig example in China, 3 million cameras, which result in less crime, but you are living under totalitarian system.
That's true.
Almost in terms of, we had this in communist Poland too. There was very little crime because the punishments were so severe. If you like, I arrested, you will be tortured. Maybe like reader in many countries like this, right? So there is I don't want to live in a society when you're tortured, when you're arrested, right? So that's not a question, but it's there is always this problem. It probably depends on the level of risk you feel, like what you are willing to sacrifice for that.
Yeah. Well, totalitarian governments are very fond of having safe places because it's under control and managed, and it reduces the freedoms, the individual liberties of people to squash dissenting voices, because you can't have that. There can only be one voice, one answer to the situation, and that's the authoritarian leader or group of leaders that are running things.
Mhm.
So that's at the extreme end of safety, right? Everything's being monitored, and it's being monitored not just for your safety, but primarily for the safety of the authoritarian regime.
Yeah.
Um, so at the other end, you've got more or less anarchy, right? You've got no laws, no control. Everyone can do whatever they want. Also not good.
Mhm.
So where between those 2 points do you want to be? Probably not in the middle, in my opinion, a little to the left, where you have more freedoms instead of more safety. But that also means that there's a little more risk in your world, right?
Yeah, this is always negotiated in society and depends on the culture. I'm sure that some society would choose more um, surveillance and resulting in safety than freedom. American society is very pro-freedom, so they would rather have less safety but more freedom. I guess maybe it will be changing one day, but right now this is the approach, and then and it's it's very very interesting. So coming back a little bit to this, it's kind of connecting it to the security of RSA, the post quantum, and so on. Um, do you think how do you think the scenario will be? Will it be that the bad guys get access to a quantum computers and break everything, or it's rather that governments will first achieve that because it's such a big money, will not speak about it? Let's say government of China or even government of US, right? Will have access to everything without telling anybody, and only a little bit after that we'll find out and do the protections from that.
Um, I'm probably agreeing with the latter part there. The big money's going to get it first, clearly.
But big money will be private or big money government level?
Well, in some places that's the same, and other places it's different. But the large corporations, the ones creating those computers, will have access to them for sure. The governments will too.
Hmm.
And the real question is, what are they going to do with it? I mean, I'm sure that our country, as well as other countries, have encrypted, pardon me, encrypted intelligence files um, from other nation states that they would love to take a look at.
Hmm. Well, I'm thinking about situation like from the some time ago. Um, Apple was known to have a very well encrypted phones that it was impossible to break. And if I remember correctly, there was some kind of criminal. I think maybe even terrorist. Yeah, it was a terrorist attack when the Apple phone of the terrorist was retrieved, and Apple refused to unencrypt it. Right, few years ago. And I'm wondering, like, this is like an edge case. This is a perfect example, right? You trust the security of Apple. If they unencrypt it, that means they have a backdoor. You basically admit you have a backdoor. If they don't unencrypt it, then there is a huge risk that maybe there is important information from law enforcement. So I'm just wondering if in reality it shouldn't be like that. There is a backdoor, where it's very well protected backdoor, and a public face you never ever mention that it's accessible, but it's actually accessible for a top security people. So
Very topical question. So, in the UK, they have been insisting that Apple put in a backdoor to allow them to decrypt people's Apple phones and any data stored on the iCloud. And Apple has refused to do this, rightly so, I think, and I'll get to that in a moment. And what they've done is they've withdrawn the encryption from UK customers. So they can't encrypt their phones and their data using Apple's encryption software. Pardon me. That doesn't mean they can't go and get their own encryption and encrypt their files to make sure that everything's safe. They could, within the scope of whatever laws are in the UK that guide them on that. But the reason I said they rightfully did that is because when you create a backdoor, it doesn't matter how safe you keep that secret, it gets out. We've experienced that here in the United States. When we created the phone system, the government wanted a backdoor to be able to listen to conversations with a warrant. Well, that's great. They get the warrant, they can listen in, but guess what? The information gets out, the technique gets out, and so now bad guys can, tap your phone and listen to it. We see it on those horror movies and spy movies all the time where the guy is unauthorized, doesn't have a proper warrant and stuff, but it's able to tap the phone. And you can kind of do the same thing with the cell phone system because it's not encrypted between the two phones. And you can stand up a fake cell phone tower and intercept phone calls and route them.
I didn't know that. Well, so this is a good point. But why do you think it is good that Apple did not agree for a backdoor? The main reason is because it was get out, basically.
Yeah, it's always going to get out. You can't keep a secret that big. I mean, how's that saying go? Two men can keep a secret if one of them's dead. Right?
That's a great point. I would say two men can keep a secret when two men is dead, because that other guy can also reveal it under specific pressures, right? Like it depends what
Certainly.
they're doing. Yeah. Let's now go to your personal experience with security and examples of attacks you personally had to defend from, or the ideas you design to protect your clients or the company you are working with. Maybe you have some interesting examples there.
Sure. So one time, we had one of our businesses where I was working had a website, and they had their customers, and they were under attack by the Chinese. And we spent over a week defending it because the developer who owned it didn't want to make the change to keep it from, because they were trying to use an exploit, and he didn't want to make the change because he wanted to observe them and learn from them what they were doing. And so our entire SOC was working around the clock, keeping them out because, it's the Chinese army, for crying out loud. They've got lots of manpower and they can work around the clock. We have a much smaller organization as far as armies go, defending us. But it all came from the fact that he had set up his own identity and access management system, and it basically stored the passwords, and he wouldn't encrypt them because he wanted to be able to send it back to them if they forgot it.
Oh, okay. That even
Because
to me sounds like a little bit.
that's a little scary. It's a little bit dated at this point. I don't think anyone's doing that, I hope, anymore. But we were like, if they forgot the password, why do you want to send them the same one? Because clearly it wasn't important enough for them to remember. They're like, well, they don't like changing it. Well, how do they know if they change it? Just set it to something new and send it to them if that's how they're reacting. But, sometimes it's an uphill climb. People don't like to have breaks. They don't like to have friction in what they're doing. Although we have it in our everyday lives and we get used to it too. We used to not have seatbelts in cars, and then we used to not be required to wear them. But, any kid out here on the planet right now gets in the car, puts their seatbelt on without thinking about it, right?
Yeah. So what did you do in this case? Did you manage to defend long enough to observe the form of attack? What was the point of observing?
We observed the attack. We knew that the attack was coming. We were doing everything we could to defend it, and ultimately we went up the chain of command in his organization and told his boss, "Look, this is how much money it's costing us per day to just do this,
Mm-hmm.
and it's tying up this number of people. It's unacceptable. We really need to make this change so that we don't have to spend all this time, money, and effort."
So if you made a change, the attack would stop. The idea was to.
All you had to do was patch it, and the attack would no longer be useful.
Uh-huh. That's amazing that you can look at it, like that you basically see. Like I know what you mean, that you see it usually in logs or in a network traffic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if people realize that it's not like completely hidden in a sense. There is data flowing, right?
There is.
You can see that. Yeah, and how about did you have an example when you failed and the system was basically broken into and data was stolen because of zero-day attack? And I'm saying you failed, but it's usually not your fault that there was a zero-day attack.
Yeah. So the one I was alluding to earlier, right, where my boss had asked me how they know it was there, we'd left that system up and running just in case, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was a virtual machine.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we should have shut it down as soon as the other one was up and online and data was transferred over,
Mm-hmm.
and the DNS had been swapped over.
Yeah.
But we didn't, and it got hacked to save time. But it would have taken us 30, 60 seconds to start it back up again.
Mm-hmm.
So, sometimes just having a good solid process is all you really need to affect some really good quality security. Having repeatable processes. So it was a big learning lesson for everyone involved. Like, okay, it's not an old style computer that takes 5 minutes to boot up. It's a VM. So that's not even a good excuse. And really, is a 5-minute delay, if there's an issue, a problem?
The idea was it was a backup system in case something happened.
Yeah, we just cut over to the new system, and there was some concerns that maybe it might not perform properly,
Mm-hmm.
and we might need to fail back. But instead of calling it and just shutting it down and keeping it, we could have shut it down and left it in place for a month, a week, year.
Mm-hmm.
No one would have been able to access it because it had been offline.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a bit of a failing on our part, and that was just really process oriented.
What was the most crazy security thing you can think of? Like the way you need to set up stuff and or defend or anything like. There was like you thought it's like that's nuts, but it works or something.
Yeah, well, we've had to do some. So when the government first decided that they would no longer accept our certificates to install on their machines to access our website,
Mm-hmm.
we had to figure out how to take their CAC certificates, get them into our system, and use that as an authentication mechanism in order to keep it secure. This wasn't a classified system or anything like that. However, it is sensitive, and we didn't want, just anybody being able to get into that environment. And it was a collaborative environment, so you could have a multidisciplinary activity going on between different departments as well, all sharing the same kind of workspace to do that collaboratively. And so it took us like 3 months to really figure something out. These days, it's pretty trivial. But back then it was pretty much cutting edge. Like, how do we get their card information to start with, right? Because they're not coming over here.
Right.
They're not coming to our office to stick their card into our computer. So we've got to like grab their public certificate off of their login. So we had to set up a whole system just to do that, to collect the information initially. Again, it's pretty easy to do now, but back then that was just nothing.
That's interesting. I'm thinking about like how typically human is the weakest part of the system in terms of security. Like the most common example is that people who might have the most sophisticated, the best algorithm of encryption. But if you put your password on a sticky note on your monitor, and that computer is accessible, then that's all gone, right? But you told me an example over the phone, right? About this story, which is kind of the opposite of this story. Can you tell it? This is, you gave me an example that you used that you ask in a various um, environment, where you cannot bring any devices to uh, for multiple
Right,
devices.
right. Yeah. So we'd implemented multi-factor authentication as a requirement for our contracts. And we had a Class 1000 clean room that had a computer that had been vetted to be safe inside that environment. It was used for highly detailed and precise miniaturized manufacturing, and had high oxygen content. So the computer had been specifically prepared and the equipment specifically rated to not spark, because you don't want that happening in a high oxygen environment because it can cause a lot of fire. But our multi-factor authentication was a USB-based device that you plugged into the computer, which might spark because you've got metal on metal. Um, so we ended up using a unique solution of providing 6 pins for them ahead of time before going into the room, and then they could tape, because they had a transparent wall so they could see out. They could tape their pins to the outside window so they could read it from the inside, because they couldn't take the paper in with them, and see what the code was. So if they had to log in multiple times, they had 6 times to log in, and then they would have to exit and get a new one. But that was more than sufficient on most days. 1 or 2 would have done. And then we just rotated that on a daily basis for them.
So this is an example where sticky note was used for security, because using any physical encryption would blow up the computer and
Will blow up the person, so even worse, right?
yeah, draw the person putting it in. So by the way, why would there be? I don't understand it. Why there has to be a high oxygen?
Had something to do with what they were making. Just the manufacturing process for that.
Interesting. I've never heard about the necessity for high oxygen for cleanness of the manufacturing.
Yeah,
Oh.
I didn't drill into the details of the why they needed to have it that way, but I definitely respected the fact that I didn't want to kill anyone.
That's a good premise, like, to start with. And when you go into this environment, you have to be like in the suit, right? Yeah, because there's too much oxygen for you.
Well, and you can't have you exposed either, right?
Yeah, because you would bring the viruses and bacteria and everything. That's interesting. Wow, I can imagine a movie scene like this. A hacker breaking in these clothes with his USB and putting it in to copy data. Like, everything blows up. But I've never seen it in a movie. It should be done. So I don't know if you can talk about it. If not, we can cut it out. But you also work with military security stuff, right? Like securing like military equipment too, or no, not really, or the systems only.
So I did work with our team on how to secure insecure things. So we have, like our OT environment across the US, a lot of really old things. In many cases, some of these systems predate computers, or at least microcomputers. So like the CAN bus on your car. So how does, the computer that's running the engine and the transmission know that the signal it's getting from the brake system on the front wheel is actually coming from the brake system on the front wheel? And should it do that thing right now? So should it shut down the transmission because it's overheating as you're doing 70 miles an hour down the highway, right? Because it was told to. Maybe by an outside force, who's managed to get access into that bus and wants to do something bad. Another spy movie opportunity there, I suppose. Connect the device to the car to send bad signals and then cause the car to like lock up on the freeway and skid and flip and fall off the bridge or whatever.
In sci-fi movies or in this or spy movies, there usually there's this trope or this like kind of stereotype, and with that all systems are not computer based or very little computers based are safer. Like the best example would be Battlestar Galactica. The only reason why, I don't know if you know but the only reason why Battlestar survived cyber attack is because it was based on computers that were not networked, right? So, do you think this is real right now? Like, for example, we have a war in Ukraine, right? Like, and maybe a cyber attacks would work against T-95 tank, but they don't work against T-32 tank because T-32 is from Second World War, and they are still using it, right?
Maybe. I mean, a lot of the things that you want to put into a battlefield or you want to protect against like an EMP, you need to shield properly. That'll just shut it down. It won't necessarily hack it. If you don't have wireless, it makes it a lot harder to hack things. A lot of the cars these days, to save on weight and just the issues of trying to wire a car, right? We'll use wireless communications. It's really short range, but still, you can set up a strong signal to do something to override that. So if it's not wirelessly networked or networked to larger systems, then it's hard to do anything about it. So a good example would be, I get ransomware at my company. All the computers that are on the network are potential targets to be able to be accessed. Maybe it can break into it to do it. Maybe it can't, but it's accessible. If, however, I've got a whole separate lab that is not connected physically on that network or to the internet, you can't get to there from here, right? And you've got to physically take something into that room to do something about it. So physical separation is a good deterrent, but it creates a lot of usefulness problems. So when we look at a lot of the SCADA equipment or some of the OT stuff, they might have a computer interface, but that software hasn't been maintained for years, decades maybe, right? And you're still using a floppy disk, but you can put it on the network and send it the controls that you need or the program you need it to run to do whatever it does. If a bad actor breaks into your system, they can get to that device if it's networked and make it do bad things, make it not work. And, in some cases, it could cause things to explode by telling the equipment to do things that it shouldn't do and to override safety protocols.
So it can be physical. Well, by the way, the most famous example of this exploding is the most famous example, I think, in security, which is the Stuxnet attack on Iranian Stuxnet. Yes.
Yeah.
Stuxnet. Do you know details about it?
Yeah. So basically, that had to be carried in, right? So it got carried in on a USB, and it told the centrifuge to spin up and spin up and spin up and spin up until it went too fast and broke.
So the idea was, so for people who are not familiar with it, what we wanted to prevent, or what probably Israel wanted to prevent, I think it was from Israel, right? Or it's not proven. The idea was to prevent the enrichment of uranium to be used in atomic bomb. And to do that, you need to use centrifuges to enrich uranium. Otherwise, if you build you have two pieces of uranium and put it together, it has a critical mass, it doesn't blow up. It has to be enriched uranium to do that, right?
Yeah.
So the centrifuges do that, and they were probably shipped from North Korea or whatever, or Russia. They got them somehow there, and they were very secure location. So this virus was created and spread all over the world to millions of computers, doing absolutely nothing bad to these computers. The only goal was that one day the guy who is working with the centrifuges will get this virus on a memory stick and will infect the computers.
And it happened.
And it happened. Then the question is, who was the idiot who actually brought the USB to the secure location like this?
So it could have just been the protocol, right? Because if you're looking at a piece of operational technology like a centrifuge, right, might need a program like how to spin the centrifuge to separate out the two different types of uranium that they're working with, or plutonium, whichever element they were using. Or how do I get this thing to mill this thing the right way? and maybe there's been a specification change. So now I need to bring that new program to it. So there's two ways to do it. I can bring it on paper, type it all in. That's prone to a lot of error. Or I can bring a USB stick and bring it in and then leave it in there, right? You don't want to bring it back out necessarily. That's what you want to do for high security. It just stays there forever now. Other cases, you might take it out. But I could get a brand new, fresh from the factory USB stick, plug it into the computer to get it, and that Stuxnet thing snuck on board, or whatever virus that is on the computer. And I take it in to update that program, and now it's been taken over. Which is why in many cases there'll be a stopgap for it. When you take something into an environment like that, the first thing you do is put it in a whole separate machine whose entire purpose in life is to scan it for viruses and malware. On the other hand, if it doesn't know about it, it can't do anything about it. If it's brand new.
So it does happen. So people actually will take to secure locations and USB with update or whatever they need.
USB, CD, whatever. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to update the computers, put patches on them, update the malware detection systems on it. If you're doing localized malware detection, right, you've got to update that, and you've got to take some sort of media in there to make that happen. And the question is, how clean can you make that media before you take it in there?
Yeah, I understand, even for a secured system, even for top secret system, but I hope that our ICBLs, for example, are not updated from USB sticks with some virus which launches them. And so I don't think the protocol should be allowing for literally what I would expect is either somebody literally typed it in, and that could be risky because the text could be wrong, or if that's not possible, then at least the whole manufacturing process perfectly from the start is done perfectly securely, not like that somebody took them. It's just really, it's crazy if you think about it, because I was like, yeah, we destroyed the Iranian centrifuges. I'm like, oh, what if the same attack was on American or anybody's atomic weapons? But that's additionally protected by human info, right? You always have to.
There's been a couple of other incidences. For a long time, people didn't think that your computer could affect the real world. Somebody wrote a little program that would move the reading head on a floppy drive back and forth until it hit the resonant frequency with the motherboard on the computer, and then the whole thing started hopping around and flexing the board because of the synchronization between those frequencies, and cracked the board and broke it.
That's amazing. Never heard about it.
Yeah.
So physical vibration of the head of a floppy board physically destroyed the motherboard.
But it had to spend a lot of time to figure out what the proper frequency was to do that, to make that happen. More recently, Kaspersky, well, it's not recent, it's been a while, but, they were wondering how hard would it be for bad actors to hack into OT equipment. So they literally built an electrical substation. Didn't connect the power leads up to it or anything, but they built one, hooked up the electrical power to run the computers and stuff inside the substation. And then they gave the IP address to a bunch of folks and said, here's an IP address, break in. These people had never seen one before, never worked on one, had no idea what it was, but they were inside of it inside of 10 minutes. And it was like 15 minutes later, they were able to do things like put displays up on, little happy faces on the displays. And if they had wanted to, they could have put the phases out of alignment and blown the station up.
Wow.
Right? For a bunch of people who had never seen it before, and being able to get it done inside of 15 minutes is something pretty amazing. But these are all pieces of equipment that were originally never intended to be networked.
And the people who are doing it, they are called white hackers or something like this?
Well, white hat hackers.
White hat hackers, yes.
So those would be people who are doing really more security research. So they're exploring systems and trying to find where the vulnerabilities are so that they find them first and they can be fixed first before the black hat hackers or the bad actors, the criminals, can get into those systems by finding the same vulnerability and taking advantage of them.
So this would be like you said it was Kaspersky Lab?
Yeah.
Who did it? So Kaspersky Lab, a company which creates antivirus software, would put a system and ask people to break into it, basically, and that would be the white hat hackers.
Yeah, and a lot of companies do that today. So that's what a pen test is, really, right? A penetration test. You have somebody who you've given permission to attack your systems, and it could be a company, it could be an employee, and they try to find vulnerabilities, problems, misconfigurations, like we talked about before. Where I've accidentally opened up the firewall too much and exposed too much, or I put a system on the internet that shouldn't be on the internet, like the SQL server, right? You don't want the database server being on the internet. You want the web server being on the internet. And they will find those things and then give you a report, and then they get paid on what they find.
Mm-hmm.
Or in the case of an employee, they just get paid, and that's their job, is to break into stuff.
Yeah, the problem is what they get paid is not as much as they would get paid on the black market, right? Like I heard that 0 days vulnerability, which by the way, maybe we should explain this. 0 day means that the company had 0 days, so no time to patch it, right? So 0 days vulnerabilities can be sold for millions of dollars, right? And you would get maybe 50,000 for discovering it, something like this, not a million.
Maybe. I guess it depends on where your moral compass is pointing.
Mm-hmm.
I'll refer you back to there was a Russian gentleman in the United States who was working for Tesla and was contacted by another Russian who offered him $1 million to go take a USB and plug it in.
Mm-hmm.
He instead went and reported him and turned over the USB. That was $1 million he gave up to do the right thing.
You should get $1 million for it.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, of course, it's always a problem. It's like criminal activities are usually more profitable than fighting criminal activities. Like criminals are better paid than FBI agents fighting it.
Yeah, the risk
That is always
there.
Yeah. I mean, you might be a little bit stressed out for the rest of your life if you did that. So yeah, but it's a good point. There's always somebody who is doing it, and then it's just interesting to see how some famous hackers actually switch sides, right? They were doing evil stuff, and then they were caught, and maybe they decided to work for government to actually help the.
Well, jail is notoriously not fun, so
I guess so. Yeah. So, do you think that this is getting worse or better over time? So, is it like, are we looking at a future where everybody will be hacked all the time and nothing will be safe, or rather it's getting better and better, and we will be seeing less of these attacks and less of bank accounts will be stolen?
So what we're really talking about is computer crime,
Yeah.
right? Committing crimes using computers by breaking into other people's computers. Civilization's been around a long time, crime's still around. So I suspect that we'll still have hackers. Hopefully, we will take a better approach to things so that it is far more difficult for them to break into those systems and steal everything, steal money, extort people, and for us to track them down by international cooperation and bring them to justice, to create a higher risk for those activities, making it less attractive. Yeah, you can make $1 million. Also, you could end up in Siberia. Right. Maybe these are bad options.
Siberia, then, yeah. I've been to Siberia. It looks nice, but I don't think I want to stay there, especially in Gulag. They're not the place to like stay. It's very interesting. But because what I'm leading to, I have a feeling, like when you train LLMs, you use a human feedback, so reinforcement learning with human feedback at the end to align LLM to more human values, right? I can imagine reversing this process. So I can imagine LLM training themselves, the evil LLM, evil AI, training themselves on you, so they understand you so well that the best hacker would not be able to social engineer you as well as that LLM, right? Like we see it, for example, in this race of AI girlfriends. You can have an AI girlfriend which is absolutely perfect, completely understands you, always supports you, and so on, right? Or boyfriend. So, and we will see something like this in social engineering of attacks, right? You will have like an online friend who speaks perfect language. It actually might be even represented by a perfect, realistic person. And then the one day they need some help, and you like them so much. So you want to help them. They don't really exist, but you think they do. These forms of attacks are coming, and they would be extremely efficient because human would never be able to play that well. Like even a KGB agent trying to lure some guy to tell the state secrets will never be that good as that AI can be, because it fully understands, remembers all the conversations. Do you see some kind of like risks in that AI environment?
There's definitely risks there, especially if it's completely online. Once you move into the real world, it becomes less risky because the AI has to show up, right?
Yeah.
But that's what human intelligence is all about, and human espionage, right?
Yeah.
Is doing those types of things and committing fully into that character role. What I see being more of an issue is, being able to find 0 days, exploits that nobody knows exists at computer speeds and take advantage of them at computer speeds without any kind of human intervention at all, which means you would need counter activities doing the exact same thing. But again, it's that process that we as humans go through. We create a thing and then we figure out, here's all the great things that we can do with it. And then we start figuring out, here are all the bad things I can do with it. Here's how I can do criminal activities. And now we have to figure out how to stop those criminal activities from happening. So it's an endless circle that I think we're going to be stuck in. It just means that a lot of times I think when we see a cyber attack now, it could go on for hours or days. And it might even take us hours, days, or even weeks and months in some cases for us to even realize that one's happening. In the future, there could be an entire attack and defense sequence that plays out before, we've had a chance to notice it at human speed, much less, being able to do anything about it.
But on the other side, I lean toward, and it's just a question of belief. It's almost like it's unprovable, right? But I lean toward this idea that the systems will become safer and humans will be the only vulnerable part. And the reason is that there do exist systems that are safe right now. I mean, safer than regular. Like let's say a software of a plane, because you can mathematically prove that they are safe, right? Like you basically go through a software verification process and prove various certifications about the system. We don't do that for everything because it's so expensive, right? Like the process multiplies the cost of the software by 2 orders of magnitude, right? But if everything is automated, if AI is generating code and then another AI, the same AI, is verifying that that code is safe, ultimately the code will be way safer than written even by experienced software engineer. So that vulnerability kind of disappears, and maybe completely. It's like a little bit like with self-driving cars, right? Like self-driving cars will be safer than human-driven cars soon, and it might be even illegal to drive a car because it poses a risk to people, which self-driving car wouldn't. So I have a feeling that software will be the same, but there is always this human element. You can always do the social engineering element, which will keep it vulnerable.
And there's the configuration element too, right?
I think configuration can be also done mostly by
Could be. The question is, will we, right? It always
will we
comes down to
trust
that.
it, right?
Well,
So
are we going to let the computer set it up for us and force us to do it? Are we willing to let the computer tell us that we have to wear our seatbelt?
yeah.
So, a lot of times we run around and we worry about the consequences later, or that we see them as nebulous or maybe even unattainable. It's not really a risk. It's just, you're just, making noise. But, sometimes slowing down a little bit is a lot better, because you can make better choices, like with the spam and the phishing emails. If you slow down just a little bit, everything will be better. So one of my friend's favorite questions is, do you know why race cars have brakes?
Why?
To go fast.
Oh, really? Because of the
Well, if you're doing 120 miles an hour and you try to make that turn without any brakes, you're crashing.
because of the tents. Yeah.
And you're going to go a lot slower now,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you've crashed. Race cars have brakes so they can go fast because you need to brake into those turns.
This
and
is
then you
very
can stop
cool.
on the gas. And when it comes to developing software and putting together business cases using digital infrastructure, we need to spend more time spending a little bit of time putting on some brakes to line everything up properly so we can go really fast instead of going really fast right at the beginning and then crashing into a few walls and then having to pick everything up, start over again, maybe throw everything away and go again. And the project reaches delays and more delays. And then what we put out's got a lot of bugs and holes and problems with it. Yeah, missing features because we wanted to go fast right out of the gate instead of, putting on our seatbelt first and then using brakes as we hit those curves.
This is a very good point, and I'm totally guilty of not following it, for example, in startups. Like, how we write a software in startups? It's like this. We write a prototype, right? Just to prove that it works. And then that prototype goes to production because who is going to rewrite it? When we were writing the prototype, we were doing the experimentation without any regard to security. It was just to, it was to show that that is possible.
Yeah.
Right. So it's very difficult to start over, invest in it when you need to move fast. But it's a good cautionary advice to take it into account because it will bite you later for sure.
It will.
Sure.
And maybe the answer is AI, right? Because now we have the AI who can help us trim that code back up, make sure that we've added in those security features before or help us add it in, right? Oh, I noticed that you didn't put in this particular security feature. You didn't check your buffers. You didn't sanitize your input. Let me throw some code in there for you to fix that.
As long as you trust this code. I noticed that I trust the code generated by AI more than I trust from a junior developer. And I think it is a mistake, at least for now. I don't know in the future, but I caught myself a few times on something which I saw in a code. I was like, how did it get there? I would never do that. And I find out that this is actually, the code I generated and completely believed it because it was the genius AI like Claude or even ChatGPT writing it. So
it's very convincing, but remember where to get its information from to start with.
Exactly.
The internet.
That's the problem, right? What it is trained on is 90% crappy code and 10% good code. So sanitation of data for training is a big deal. Also, it's very clear, it's actually so clear because if you ask for a code in Python or JavaScript, it does pretty good job because there's so much training data. But if you ask, like I, for example, write shaders, right, for the graphic card or CUDA code, so bad. It's so bad because the training data was not there. So yeah, that's a good. So to finalize our discussion, what advices would you have for people to in everyday work, and maybe for developers, because I think most people watching it would be technical people. What advice would you give them to make their life safer and their company safer?
Take a deep breath and relax before reacting to things that come in. Learn a bit about what you can do with your particular discipline, whether it's IT operations or with software development or even on the help desk, right? To make sure that you're being safer in what you do, because cybersecurity is all about computer safety, right? It's like fire safety or crossing the road. Everyone's got to participate. Everyone's got to do their little bit in order to make sure they're doing the right thing. And I think we'll be able to move forward in a lot better way and a lot quicker pace if everyone's involved in making the world safer for everyone, as opposed to just running headlong into, I need to make money.
That's a good advice. Hopefully people will follow it. We'll see about that. Great. Thank you very much. It was a great conversation. Thank you.
It's great thinking.